Due to the graphic nature of this content, listener discretion is advised, as we will be talking about rape, murder, and various other things. As you know, we are continuing on with the John Wayne Gacy series. This will be part 4 of the podcast. So stay tuned, lay back, grab a drink, and hang out for a bit. All right? Bye. Hey guys, welcome back. We're continuing on with the murders that John Wayne Gacy committed. So, as you all know, listener discretion is highly advised. And, so, you know, what the deal is, grab a drink, take a seat, read a book, and listen. So, as we all know, we covered Waterloo and Chicago and his political nuances. We're going to get on to the nitty-gritty, which are the murders. Remember, my dear ones, listener discretion is highly advised. Gacy murdered at least 33 young men and boys and buried 26 of them in the crawl space of his house. Gacy usually lured a lone victim to his house, although on one occasion Gacy also had called doubles. 2 victims killed in one evening. Several victims were lured with the promise of a job with PDM, others with offer of drink, drugs, or money for sex. So he was still soliciting young gay men. His victims included people he knew and random individuals he lured from Chicago's Greyhound bus station, Bughouse Square, or simply off the streets. Some victims were grabbed by force, others conned into believing Gacy, who often carried a sheriff's badge and spotlights on his back, those old black Oldsmobile, was a policeman. So he kind of like did a Bundy and impersonated a law enforcement officer. As we tend to know, some serial killers, in order to lure their victims, they often played roles as law officials or something else. Or in Bundy's case, he was an injured person or a law enforcement officer, you know. But in Gacy's case, he impersonated an officer. Inside Gacy's home, his usual modus operandi was to supply the youth with drink, drugs, or generally gain his trust. He would produce a pair of handcuffs to show a magic trick, sometimes as a part of the clown routine. He typically cuffed his own hands behind his back, then pretentiously, released himself with a key, which he hid between his fingers. So he pretended he was cuffed, he couldn't get out of it, and he actually had the cuff key within his hands, in his fingers. Where he released himself with the key and then offered to show the intended victim how to release himself from the handcuffs. With his victim manacled and unable to free himself, Gacy then made a statement to the effect, well, the trick is you have to have the key. Gacy referred to this act of restraining his victim as the handcuff trick. So this was one of his ploys, was to liquor up the said victim and handcuff him, try to show him a magic trick. Having restrained his victim, Gacy proceeded to rape and torture his captive. He frequently began sitting on the victim's chest before forcing the victim to fillet him. So he forced the poor guy to blow him while sitting on his chest. So he was basically right in his face. Shit. He then inflicted acts of torture, including burning with cigars, making his captive imitate a horse as he sat on their back and pulled on the makeshift reins around their necks, and violation of foreign objects such as dildos and prescription bottles after he had sodomized his captive. To immobilize his captive's legs before engaging in acts of torture, Gacy frequently manacled their ankles into a 2x4 with handcuffs attached to each end, an act inspired by the Houston mass murders. He is also known to have verbally taunted one of many of his victims throughout their continued abuse, and to have dragged or forced several victims to crawl into his bathroom, where he partially drowned them in the bathtub before repeatedly reviving them, enabling him to continue the prolonged assault. So he was kind of like a David Parker Ray when it came to the violation of the person's body by sticking foreign objects in the hole. So he was using dildos and he was using pill bottles, and right after he would do shit to them, and then he would stick those in there and like mess with them that way. How very David Parker Ray of him. Maybe that's where he got it too. Who knows? David Parker Ray to Gacy, because this was before like his time too. Or like in between, kind of, sorta. Where did I go? Okay. Gacy typically murdered his victims by placing a rope tourniquet around their necks before progressively tightening the rope with a hammer handle. He referred to his act as a rope trick, frequently informing the captive, "This is the last trick." If in at least one instance he had read the part of Psalm 23, and as he tightened the rope around his victim's necks, occasionally the victim had convulsed for an hour or two before dying. Although several victims died by asphyxiation from cloth rags stuffed deep in their throat, except his two final victims, they were murdered between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. After death, Gacy usually stored the victims' bodies under his bed for up to 24 hours before burying the victim in his crawl space, where he periodically poured a quick lime to hasten the decomp in his victims. Some victims' bodies were taken to the garage and embalmed prior to the burial. So when I say embalmed, you guys have to remember earlier when we were doing the reading of the first part of his youth, he was actually out here in Las Vegas as a mortician's assistant. He was actually learning. He actually embalmed people while working in a mortuary. So we're gonna get into the murders now. So like I said, children, listener discretion is highly advised. This is the murder of Timothy McCoy. Gacy's first known murder occurred on January 3rd, 1972. According to Gacy's later account, following a family party on the evening of January 2nd, he decided to drive to Civic Center on a loop to view a display of ice sculptures in the early hours of the following morning. He then lured a 16-year-old named Timothy Jack McCoy from Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal into his car. McCoy was traveling from Michigan to Omaha, Nebraska. Gacy took McCoy on a sightseeing tour of Chicago, then drove him to his home with the promise that he could spend the night and he'd be driven back to the station in time to catch his bus. Prior to McCoy's identification, he simply was known as the Greyhound bus boy. Gacy claimed that he woke up early the following morning to find McCoy standing in his bedroom doorway with a kitchen knife in his hand. He then jumped from his bed to McCoy, raised both arms in a gesture of surrender, tilting the knife upwards and accidentally cutting Gacy's forearm. Gacy twisted the knife from McCoy's wrist, banged his head against the bedroom wall, and kicked him against his wardrobe and walked towards him. McCoy then kicked Gacy in the stomach, doubling over. Then Gacy grabbed McCoy, shouting, "Motherfucker, I'll kill you." He then wrestled McCoy to the floor, and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest as he straddled him. So, McCoy was the first of the many murders that he had committed, and he had stabbed him. As McCoy lay dying, Gacy claimed he washed the knife in his bathroom, then went to his kitchen and saw an open carton of eggs with the slab of unsliced bacon on his kitchen table. McCoy had also set the table for two. He had walked to Gacy's room to wake him while absent-mindedly carrying the kitchen knife in his hand. Gacy buried McCoy in his crawl space and later covered his grave with a layer of concrete. In an interview several years after his arrest, Gacy had said immediately after killing McCoy, he felt totally drained, yet noted that he stabbed McCoy as he listened to the gurgulations, gasping for air, that he experienced a mind-numbing orgasm. He added, "That's when I realized that death was the ultimate thrill." So the poor kid was just making him breakfast and took the knife and accidentally, and Gacy fucking went off psycho. He was fucking paranoid ass. This is the second murder of John Butkovich. Gacy said the second time he committed murder was around January 1974. This victim remains unidentified. Gacy strangled him and then placed his body in a closet before burial. He later stated that the body fluids leaked from the victim's mouth and nose, staining his carpet. As a result, Gacy regularly stuffed cloth rags down the victim's throat. Usually, at the time, was the victim's own underwear or a sock, and put them in their mouth so it could prevent leakage from occurring. On July 31st, 1975, another of Gacy's employees, John Butkovich, an 18-year-old from Lombard, disappeared. Butkovich's car was found parked near the corner of Sheridan and Lawrence, with his jacket and wallet inside and the keys still in the ignition. The day before his disappearance, Butkovich had confronted Gacy over 2 weeks with his outstanding back pay. Butkovich's father, a Yugoslav immigrant, called Gacy, who he claimed was happy to help search for his son, but was sorry Butkovich had run away. When questioned by the police, Gacy said Butkovich and his two friends had arrived at his house demanding an overdue pay, but they had reached a compromise, and all three of them left. Over the following 3 years, Butkovich's parents had called police more than 300 times, urging them to investigate Gacy further. See, not only was, he was already kind of like a suspect or a person of interest through the victims' families, because Gacy was basically the last person they were seen with, except with the case of Timothy McCoy, who was actually just a passerby, and he got entwined in his webs. Gacy later admitted that encountering Butkovich is exiting his car in the corner of West Lawrence Avenue, waving to attract his attention. According to Gacy, he approached his car stating, "I want to talk to you." Gacy invited Butkovich into the car, then invited him back into his home. All of a sudden, to settle the issue with his overdue wages, be like, "Hey, let's talk about this and sell this out." At his home, he offered him a drink. Offered him a drink, then conned him into allowing his wrist to be cuffed behind his back. So he did the whole fucking handcuff trick on this kid. He later convinced to have him sat on the kid's chest for a while before he strangled him. He stowed his body into his garage, intending to bury the body later in a crawl space, but his wife and stepdaughters returned earlier than expected. He buried the body under the concrete floor of the garage with an empty space where he initially intended to dig a drain tile. So what the drain tile is actually this is like a mortuary term too. It's like when you have embalming a body and you're trying to drain the fluids, you gotta put something where the liquids will go or drain into. So cruising years, we're not done yet, children. We still have a lot of people to go through. In addition to keeping his business expanded, Gacy freely admitted in 1975 was also where he began the frequency of his excursions for sex with young males. So he was actually cruising for young gay men. He committed most of his murders between 76 and 78, as he lived alone during his divorce. He did invite some of his employees to live with him, but some of them were caught weary of what he was up to and split. As you recall, we did talk about two people who were, were in the substance of getting, assaulted or attempted assaulted by Gacy himself, where one actually beat him up and took off, and the other one was just like, there. Alright. Okay, so although Gacy remained egregious and civically minded, several neighbors noticed erratic changes in his behavior after the divorce. This included seeing him keeping in company with young males, hearing his car arrive or depart early hours of the morning, or seeing lights in his house switched on and off in the early hours. One neighbor recollected that for several years the sounds of muffled, high-pitched screaming, shouting, and crying had repeatedly awakened her and her son in early hours. She identified the sounds as emanating from a house adjacent from theirs on Somerdale Avenue. So this is what kind of pisses me off, is that a neighbor hears someone crying or screaming or muffled screaming. You don't bother to call the fucking cops? Like, seriously, where's your fucking common sense? You hear someone screaming, you call the fucking cops. Muffled screaming, crying, yeah, you're gonna want to call the police. You don't think that, he's gonna be like, timid about that shit. And who knows? Maybe if the neighbors had, some decent commoncy, they would call the fucking cops. And maybe most of the people that, he was attempting to rape, or he was in the process of murdering and raping, opposite, switch reverse, whatever, and, maybe they would have been able to save lives. But that was not the case, because they were afraid and did not know what the fuck they were saying, or could say. 1976. 1 month after his divorce was finalized, Gacy abducted and murdered 18-year-old Daryl Sampson. He was last seen alive in Chicago April 6, 1976. He buried him under the dining room with a section cloth lodged in his throat. 5 weeks later, on the afternoon of May 14th, 15-year-old Randall Reffitt disappeared while walking home from Senn High School. Hours after Gacy abducted Reffitt, 14-year-old Samuel Stapleton vanished as he walked from his sister's apartment. So he did what we read earlier, children, is that he would call what he called doubles. They were buried together in the crawl space. Investigators believe both victims were murdered the same evening. So he got his jollies off on with one, waited a couple hours, and did the same with the other kid. So, need to remind you, these are young men and teenagers that he was targeting. So, that was a 14-year-old, a 15 and a 14-year-old that he had just attacked. He did pull the double with. On June 3rd, Gacy killed 17-year-old Lakeview teenager named Michael Bonin. My bad. He disappeared while traveling from Chicago to Waukegan. Gacy strangled him with a ligature and buried him under the spare bedroom. 10 days later, Gacy murdered a 16-year-old uptown youth named William Carroll and buried him in a common grave in the crawl space. Carroll seemed to have been the first of the 4 victims known to have been murdered between June and August 6th, 1976. 3 were between 16 and 17 years old, and one unidentified murder victim appears to have been an adult. So you see, he kind of targeted more teens than adults, because teens were more likely to be more naive and to be conned into easier shit, where adults had common sense and said, yeah, nah bro, I'm good. Except probably the one that was either in his cruising stage or curious of some sorts, who knows. On August 5th, 16-year-old Minnesota youth named James Hackinson is last known to have phoned his family, possibly from Gacy's house. So this could be like a clue, like he had called his mom or his family, be like, hey, I'm over here, don't worry, and all of a sudden he's gone. He died of suffocation. His body was buried in a crawl space beneath the body of 17-year-old Bensonville youth named Rick Johnston, who was last seen alive on August 6th. So he was still continuously either doing a one-nighter or a double in one night. Gacy had thought to have murdered 2 further unidentified males between August and October in 76. October 24th, Gacy abducted and killed teenage friends Kenneth Parker and Michael Marino. Michael, my bad. I'm reading too fucking fast, guys. Michael Marino. And the 2 were last seen outside a restaurant on Clark Street in Chicago. 2 days later, 19-year-old construction worker William Bundy disappeared after informing his family he was to attend a party. Bundy died of suffocation. Gacy buried the body between his master bedroom. Apparently, he had worked for Gacy. So, like we said before, he did target his own employees in PDM, and where he will offer, like, you can borrow my car, or you can borrow this car, or you can borrow these tools if you give me something in return. And we all know what that is, children. If you have to connect the dots, let me connect them for you. He would offer them that for either sexual favors, And when in turn of those sexual favors, he would get violent, and oftentimes he would rape, his employees. And it was that one he had taken to Florida with him, and yeah. In December 1976, another PDM employee, 17-year-old Gregory Godzik, disappeared. His girlfriend last saw him outside her house as he had driven her home following a date. Godzik had worked for PDM only 3 weeks before he disappeared. He had informed his family that Gacy had him dig trenches for some kind of drain tiles in his crawl space. Godzik's car was later found abandoned in Niles. And his parents and his older sister Eugenia contacted Gacy about his disappearance. Gacy claimed that he had run away from home, having indicated before he had wished to do so. He also claimed that receiving an answering machine message from Godzik shortly after he had disappeared. When he was asked if he could play the message for his parents, Gacy said, "Oh, I deleted it, or I erased it." So he was kind of being trying to backtrack and say, "Oh, well, he did say he wanted to run away. He was not happy at home, and blah blah blah." And then they asked him, "Can we listen to the message for ourselves?" "Nah, I erased it." In 1977, July 20th, 1977, Gacy lured 19-year-old John Cizik to his house on the pretense of buying a Plymouth Satellite. He later confessed to strangling him in the spare bedroom, claiming Rossi was asleep in the house, and the following morning, Gacy had later sold the car to Rossi for $300. Between 76 and 77, it's known that he had killed an unidentified male. Adult male. He buried him in a crawl space between the body of 20-year-old Michigan native named John Prestige, who had disappeared on March 15th, shortly before his disappearance. Prestige had mentioned he had obtained work with a local contractor. See, this is where the law enforcement started to connect the dots, because each time the victim had went missing or whatnot, they already had ties with Gacy or working for PDM, or they just knew that he was working with a local contractor. So they start connecting the dots, but they don't know what's going on yet. Gacy then murdered one additional unidentified youth and buried him in a crawl space in the spring or early summer of 1977. The exact time of this murder is unknown. On July 5th, Gacy killed a 19-year-old from Crystal Lake, Matthew Bowman. Bowman's mother last saw him in a suburban train station. Following month, Rossi was arrested for stealing gasoline while driving John Cizik's car. The gas attendant had noted the license plate, and the police had traced the car to Gacy's house. When questioned, Gacy told them that John had sold him the car in February, saying that he needed money to leave town. A check of the VM confirmed that the car had belonged to him. The police did not pursue the matter further, although they did inform his mother that her son had sold his car. By the end of 1977, it was known that Gacy had murdered 6 more young men between the ages of 16 and 21. The first of these victims was 18-year-old Robert Gilroy, the son of Chicago police of a police sergeant. He was last seen alive on September 15th. Gilroy lived just 4 blocks from Gacy, and he was murdered and buried in the crawl space. So he got brazen. He actually killed a police sergeant's son. He was murdered and buried in the crawl space on September 12th. Gacy had flown to Pittsburgh to supervise a remodeling project and did not turn to Chicago until September 16th. It's because he was known to be in another state at the time Gilroy was last seen. Decided to support Gacy's claim of assistance from one or more accomplices in several homicides. 10 days after Gilroy was seen, a 19-year-old former Marine, John Maury, disappeared from leaving his mother's house to walk to his apartment. He had strangled Maury and buried his body beneath the master bedroom. On October 17th, 21-year-old Minnesota native Russell Nelson disappeared. He was last seen outside a Chicago bar. Nelson was looking for contracting work. Gacy then murdered him and buried him beneath the guest bedroom. Less than 4 weeks later, Gacy murdered 16-year-old Kalamazoo, Michigan teenager Robert Winch and buried him in the crawl space. November 18th, 20-year-old father of one, Tommy Bowling, disappeared after leaving a Chicago bar. 3 weeks after the murder of Tommy Bowling, on December 9th, the 19-year-old Marine David Talsma disappeared after informing his mother he was going to attend a rock concert in Hammond. Gacy then later strangled Talsma with a ligature and buried him in the crawl space close to the body of John Mallory. So he did actually attack two former Marines. It's jacked up because a documentary I'm watching now on Peacock, they were talking about John Mallory and his mother had, these suspicions, and there was so many questions that were not answered by law enforcement. And the thing was, she kept questioning, why is he lying? And that something's not right. He would never say this type of thing, or he would never do anything like this. And Gacy was like, well, you didn't know your son well enough. And I did, talking all types of shit. And it was it's heartbreaking that, someone was so ballsy and brazen to be saying that type of those type of words to somebody, especially if they're in armed forces. This is what baffles me. How did they get wrapped in Gacy's web? I just want to know how he fucking finessed them into working. He they said he also just fucking grabbed them off the street or got him so drunk and intoxicated that he brought him home like that. Carrying on. Alright, on December 30th, Gacy abducted 19-year-old student Robert Donnelly from Chicago bus stop at gunpoint. He drove him to his house where he raped, tortured, and repeatedly dunked Donnelly's head into a bathtub until he passed out. Gacy taunted him with a statement such as, aren't we playing fun games tonight? Donnelly later testified at Gacy's trial that he was in such pain that he asked Gacy to kill him. And Gacy replied, I'm getting round to it. After several hours, Gacy drove Donnelly to his workplace and released him, warning him that if he complained to police, they would not believe him. So, Donnelly was actually one of his was just a rape victim. He was not murdered. He actually was let go. So, I wonder what kind of caused him to say, I'm just gonna fuck with this kid first and let him go and not kill him. But he is fortunate that he survived. Donnelly in 1978 reported the assault, and Gacy questioned police. Sorry guys. Gacy was questioned by police on January 6, 1978. Gacy admitted to having a slave sex relationship with Donnelly, but insisted that everything was consensual. Added that he didn't pay the kid the money he had promised him. So the police believed him and filed no charges. So this is another thing I want to kind of bring up when it comes to murders and stuff like that. When they have serial rapists and all that, and they're bringing up the whole, it was a master-slave relationship. And it's just you honestly believe that from them saying that, yeah, they're kind of throwing people under the bus who actually live that type of lifestyle. And it's sickening and sad that Gacy would go that far to say, hey, yeah, it was a sex slave thing, it was an agreement, it got a little rough. He didn't say anything at first, and he would have known he was, he probably gave the whole XYZ type of responses to the whole situation. So after him being reported to the police, Gacy then killed 19-year-old William Kindred, who disappeared on February 16th. After telling his fiancée, who knew Gacy, that he was to spend the evening at the bar, Kindred was the final victim Gacy had buried in his crawl space. So, like we said, there was only 26 bodies that were found underneath his crawl space, and the rest of them were actually dumped in a river. So as far as they know. But we got to remember, guys, he did travel in different states. And we don't know if he had any other more victims that were statewide or around the country. On March 21st, he lured 26-year-old Jeffrey Ringgold into his car. Shortly after Rignall entered the car, Gacy chloroformed him and drove him to his house, where his arms and head were restrained in a pillory device affixed to the ceiling. Gacy raped and tortured Rignall with various instruments, including a lit candle, whips, and repeatedly chloroformed him into unconsciousness. Gacy then drove Rignall to Chicago's Lincoln Park, where he had dumped his body, unconscious but alive. Oh my god, guys. I'm podcasting from home right now, and I have, you guys know the deal. I have my offspring and my mom. So my mom's, giving some goofy shit right now. It's hard to keep concentration. She's doing goofy shit, and my kids in there cracking up. Alright, guys. Back to it. So he left Jeffrey Rignall unconscious in a park in Chicago after he raped and tortured him. So he basically just probably threw wax on him and whipped him and shit. Shut up. Rignall managed to stagger to his girlfriend's apartment, where police were informed of the assault, but did not investigate Gacy. Rignall was able to recall through the haze of the night the Oldsmobile, the Kennedy Expressway, and particular side streets. He and two friends staked out the Cumberland exit of the expressway, and in April, Rignall saw the Oldsmobile, which he had stated him and his friends followed to 8213 West Somerdale. Police obtained an arrest warrant, and Gacy was arrested on July 15th. He faced trial for battery against Rignall. So, he actually went out there. He was assaulted, he had his body dumped in a park. He managed to make it back to his girlfriend's house. The police were called, and he was able to recall certain details. Even though he was chloroformed, he was able to identify certain things like street signs, the pikeway, the pike, everything, which is actually amazing, because chloroform actually is kind of like a memory wipe too. Kind of deletes some files there. And it's just it's amazing that he actually survived that. Good for him. Alright, so by 1978, the crawl space had no more room for further bodies. He later confessed to police that he considered stowing bodies in his attic initially, but he had been worried about complications arising from the leakage. Therefore, he chose to dispose his victims off the I-55 bridge and to the Des Plaines River. Gacy had stated he had thrown 5 bodies in the river in 1978. He believed one had landed on the passing barge. Only 4 bodies were ever found. So 4 bodies were recovered. The 5th one never was. The first known victim to be thrown off the bridge into the river was 20-year-old Timothy O'Rourke. He was murdered in mid-June after leaving his Dover Street apartment to purchase cigarettes. Shortly before his disappearance, O'Rourke had told his roommate a contractor on the northwest side had offered him a job. So this is where, I keep saying, guys, there were dots were forming, but the police were not connecting. So I kind of want to say, the police were lacking, the wit to connect the fucking dots. I mean, hello, contractor, northwest side, people had reported him for assault and battery, rape, and they still were not investigating him. There was a big problem there because maybe he had known so many people, and he had people in his it's not saying that he had bought people out. They already were fucking watching him because of his activities, especially with him targeting young men and teenagers. So here we go. On November 4th, Gacy killed 19-year-old Frank Langdingen. Sorry if I fucking butcher his last name. I mean, no disrespect. His naked body was found at the Des Plaines River in Shanahan on November 12th. On November 24th, 20-year-old Elmwood Park resident James Mazzara disappeared while sharing Thanksgiving dinner with his family. Mazzara had informed his sister the day prior to his disappearance that he was going to be working in the construction industry and doing all right. He was last seen alive walking in the direction of the Bughouse Square carrying a suitcase. So unfortunately, he probably was lured by Gacy and saying, yeah, I'm working in construction now, everything's gonna be all good, and he disappears. Then his body is found in the river in Shanahan. And this is the one that takes the cake, guys. The murder of Robert Peist. Everyone says his name is Peist or it's Peist. I mean, it's Piest or Peist. It's just either how people pronounce his name. Robert Peist. Peist is actually how you pronounce his last name. People keep saying it's Peist, Pist, or whatever. It's Peist. So on the afternoon of December 11th, 1978, Gacy had visited the Nissan pharmacy in Des Plaines just to discuss potential remodeling deal with the store owner, Phil Torf. Well, he was within earshot of 15-year-old part-time employee Robert Peist. Gacy had mentioned him as firm often hired teenage boys at a starting wage of $5 per hour, almost double the pay Peist earned in the pharmacy. Shortly after Gacy had left the pharmacy, Peist's mother had arrived at the store and drove her son home so the family could celebrate her birthday together. Peist asked his mother to wait, adding that some contractor wants to talk to me about a job. He left the store at 9 p.m., promising to return shortly. Peist was murdered shortly after 10 p.m. at Gacy's home. Gacy later stated that his house, he asked Peist whether he would, what anything was he wouldn't do for the right price, to which Peist replied that he did not mind working hard. In response, Gacy stated good money could be earned by hustling, although Peist was dismissive. Gacy then duped Peist in donning the handcuffs and before saying, "I'm going to rape you, and you can't do anything about it." As Peist began weeping, he also stated that he had placed a rope around his neck, and the boy was crying scared. Gacy admitted to having received a phone call from a business acquaintance as Peist lay dying, suffocating on the bedroom floor. So he actually did really, he did assault him and he did murder him. And this was unfortunately on his mother's birthday, which is a sad memory for her to have. This was the last murder that they knew of before shit hit the fan for Gacy. We're gonna get a little bit into the investigation, and we're gonna call it quits. So this is the part of the investigation. When Peist failed to return, his family had filed a missing persons report with the Des Plaines police. Torf named Gacy as the contractor Peist had most likely had left the store to talk to about the job. Lieutenant Joseph Kozenzak, whose son attended Maine West High School, like Peist, chose to investigate Gacy further. Having spoken to Peist's mother on the morning of December 12th, Kozenzak became convinced that Peist had not run away from home. A routine check of Gacy's criminal background revealed that he had an outstanding battery charge against him in Chicago, and he had served a prison sentence in Iowa for the sodomy of a 15-year-old boy. See, if the police actually had done their jobs right and investigated Gacy, they would have already seen all the red flags popping up. The assaults, the intimidation, the sodomy of the 15-year-old boy, and so on and so forth. So with that said, being kiddos, we are going to continue this tomorrow. Join me tomorrow as I continue into the investigation of John Wayne Gacy. Like I said, I've been getting my information off of murderpedia.org, and also from watching the many documentaries that are on YouTube, Peacock, and Amazon Prime. Want to thank you guys for continuing your support and listening. This has been a crazy venture so far with going into John Wayne Gacy. We didn't really get into Bunny that much because, we were kind of rushed with that. So, I might revisit that soon, but we're going to keep going with the whole serial killer series. If you guys have anybody in mind, please don't hesitate to drop a line. You guys know my social medias. If not, then I will... most likely just tell you guys. You can hit me up on Snapchat at Cy Edwards, or look me up on Instagram at oddpods of the odd broad, and that's how you can get a hold of me. So you guys be safe out there, and remember, don't get in strangers' cars, wash your hands, wear a mask, and stay away from creepy people. Alright, you guys be safe. This is Odd Broad signing out. Bye.